Hi everybody, this is Miguel, and today we're going to have a conversation with John Julius from Spanglish in a minute. And we will talk about the challenges that we may face when it comes to learning a second language. Hola a todos, soy Miguel. Hoy estaremos hablando con John Julius del canal Spanglish in a minute y estaremos hablando acerca de los problemas y las dificultades que nosotros podemos encontrar cuando estamos aprendiendo un segundo idioma. Okay, so here we are with the one and only John Julius from Spanglish in a minute. Thank you, John, for being here with us. How are you today?
It's a pleasure to be with you, Miguel. It's a pleasure to bond, to make a connection with a fellow English teacher, especially one who has learned the language as a foreigner. Basically, it's fascinating to me to see people who have reached the level of English that you have. With English not being your original tongue.
Sure, and actually I think that's something that we share, we have in common because you have pretty much the same experience with when it comes to learning another language, with Spanish, of course. And I ever since I found your channel on YouTube, I found very amazing and fascinating how you manage to do your classes speaking Spanish, speaking in English, and I think that's pretty awesome for both Spanish and English learners, because I think that's pretty much your goal with that. So why don't you talk about a little bit about your background and why did you choose to start a channel for teaching English or Spanish to your for your users, for your visitors?
Well, sure. I mean, I was born and raised in New York City, and I came to Seville, Spain 17 years ago, thinking I was going to learn Spanish and then return to New York City. New York City is a city with, as you know, it's a very Latin city, and if you can speak both English and Spanish in New York City, the city opens up for you. You're connected to a lot more cultures. But I met my future wife 1 year after being in Spain, and that was really how I became self-taught in Spanish. Living with my wife, we speak all the time in Spanish, and so I was immediately immersed in Spanish. Also, I'm a very determined person. I think you and I share the idea, Miguel, that there are no miracle learning strategies. I mean, if you want to learn another language, it takes time, it takes patience, and it takes practice. Okay, and both you and I know that you can't do it without that. I mean, I'm not stupid, but I don't think I have a special gift for languages. I think the only reason I can speak Spanish like I do is because I'm very hardworking. And it probably took me 2 years to be able to defend myself in Spanish. And so I've also taught English for about 15 years here in Spain, and I kind of see the challenges that, I mean, I think one of the advantages that, for example, you have teaching English over me is that you are aware of the specific challenges of Hispanohablantes trying to learn English, whereas I didn't at first. But after having taught for 15 years in Spain, I have a very, very good idea of the specific challenges of Spanish speakers learning English, and so I try to incorporate that into my lessons. And I thought that that might be something I could do where I could just give students on the screen every sentence first in English, every sentence first in Spanish, then in English, and then the people who were really willing to work would be able to look at the descriptions in the commentary sections, hear the language, read it, hear it again, and they could compare and contrast and make sense of the grammar on their own rather than me giving it to them. Although sometimes I do give them grammatical hints.
Sure.
And so that's why I started it.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Actually, you mentioned something pretty much interesting, and it's the fact that there's a lot of people who think that they might have like a magic way to learn right now another language, and it's sad because I found a lot of people spending a lot of time and money in
Yes.
in methods and lessons that basically are out of no use at the end, and
And are certainly not worth the money you're paying.
Sure.
That's the thing.
Sure.
I mean, you know, I agree with you completely. Anyone who sells their method as a kind of quick learning, I would think that's an immediate reason to doubt their plan.
that's a red flag.
Especially-
That's
Yes, it's
like-
a red flag
Yeah.
that tells you, be careful with this person. If they're trying to sell the idea that you can learn quicker with them than with somebody else, that's just not true. It's not up to the teacher. The teacher can guide you, but the hard work has to be done by you.
Totally.
I am in complete agreement with you that is a red flag, as you say. If someone is selling you their program as you will learn faster, you might want to think twice before you spend any money on that program.
It's funny because we have a saying in Spanish, and well, actually, I used to say to say this thing to my students, and it's te doy la comida, pero tú tienes que poner el hambre. It's something like I feed you, but then you have to show how hungry you are in order
Yeah, you would
to
say
get
in English,
that.
I think, you know, I'll serve the food, but you have to come to the table hungry.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a very important thing for my students because as you said, we are basically guides, and you and I share something that is a very interesting thing, and is that we are both pretty much self-taught. You in Spanish and I in English. So from that self-teaching experience, what do you think could have been the biggest challenge for you when it comes to the process of learning Spanish?
Well, good question, and I have the same question for you, and I want you to answer that. But
Sure.
probably the most difficult thing for me was, I mean, you know, there's a lot of debate about what it means to think in another language, and it's become a kind of cliche. You know, people say thinking in another language, but it's actually quite a precise phrase because, you know, if you think in Spanish, what that means to me is the way you organize the sentence and you organize the parts of the sentence in a specific way. And the problem is that the parts of the sentences are not organized the same way in English as in Spanish. So, for example, the placement of the objects, okay? Normally in English, for example, if I say, I give it or I give it to you, right? In Spanish, it's...
Te lo doy.
Yes. In other words, so if you're going to translate that literally, you would say, you, it, give, right? So
Sure.
that means that if you're thinking in Spanish but speaking in English, you would say, you, it, give.
Sure,
All right?
that's going to be so messy for you.
So messy. So I think the most difficult thing for me was thinking in Spanish, which means to me ordering the phrase correctly in Spanish, ordering the parts of the sentence correctly in Spanish so that I didn't sound like Tarzan when I spoke.
But did you have like how could I say? Did you have like an educational process at first, or were you fully immersed in the Spanish culture and environment when you started learning?
Well, it's a good question, Miguel. I mean, like a lot of people, I thought learning Spanish would be a lot easier than it was, right? I thought learning a foreign language would be easier.
Spanish
because
is
in
tough.
The United States, yeah.
It's
in the
harder than
United
English.
States,
I would say that.
I think, Miguel, it's harder at first because when you're first learning Spanish, you have to learn all the different tenses, all the different verb tenses, which you don't have to learn in English. For example, in English, you say, I will go, you will go, he will go. And in Spanish, it's iré, irás, irá, iramos, iremos. So in other words, you have to remember all the endings. And if you can't do that, so it's harder at first in Spanish because the basics that you need to be able to communicate to people, it's harder to learn that at first. Where in English, I think the basics are not so hard. But when you get to intermediate or advanced level in English, the phrasal verbs come in, where instead of saying to cancel a meeting, you say to call off a meeting. Instead of saying to postpone a meeting, you say to put off a meeting. So that type of inclusion of new vocabulary with verbs and prepositions, because as you know, perhaps the most difficult thing in language learning, I think, Miguel, are the small words, not the big words. So if you have, for example, a lot of small words in a sentence, it's very, very difficult because maybe you have 10 small words in a sentence. If I say, will you call it off for me? Right? Lo cancelarás. It's like very, very hard to, even me in Spanish, it's like, will you call it off for me? Would I say, me lo cancelarás? Right? So it's very, very hard to kind of think of endings, tiny words. So I think that was the most difficult thing. So to answer your question, I did study Spanish before, but I used CDs. I listened to them. I was told that I had an advanced level in Spanish before I came to Spain. I came to Spain and I didn't understand anything. So, I had to...
That usually happens.
Yes, it usually happens. And I think a lot of people students think, Miguel, maybe you agree, they think they can avoid that step. They think they can avoid that discomfort. It's impossible.
I would say that's the most important step you have to take in order to really get fluent.
Yes. I mean, you actually, didn't you work in a call center?
Yeah, I did. Actually, it's funny because I started learning English when I was 13. It was back in school, in high school. And even though I always was like the nerd kid from the group and everything, I was so into English. I loved that so much when I first got the chance to start learning at school, that I always used songs, movies. I used to learn the lines of the movies. I've been a Star Wars fan my whole life, and I pretty much know by heart all of the lines of the movies, at least from the first trilogy. And then I had the chance to get a friend from the United States back then. I'm talking about the 80s, right? The mid-early 80s. There was a service called Youth for Understanding. And they had this pen pal thing where you could find a friend from another country and get like a correspondence.
Yep.
I got to meet a few people from other countries. One of them, she was a girl from Connecticut. I still have I still write and well, we are connected, right? And I got the chance to meet her when I was in the United States. The thing is that I got to visit her. I think it was 2002, 2003. Anyways, I was in the United States, and I thought I was kind of fluent. I was able to talk to other people, to communicate. But then I had the chance to work at a call center. And it was crazy because by the time I got to the phones, I basically understood maybe the 40% of what I heard. And I thought, man, I've been learning and speaking English for maybe 20 years. and I thought I really mastered the language. There, I realized I didn't. It was,
Yes,
I
I
think
mean-
it was the process that got me to really, to be able to think in English, really. And,
Yeah, I mean,
and it was so
there's a-
frustrating. It was so frustrating because I spent 2 months in training, and I was about to quit. Something happened, and from it was overnight maybe. Somehow my mindset changed, and then I started like flowing with the people who were calling and everything, and that was it. I think that was
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. Excuse me, Miguel. Is that there are those moments of like revelation, almost miraculous moments where suddenly something clicks in your brain. But usually those moments come after many, many, many years of work. They don't come like in the first year of
Sure.
learning a language.
You need
They
you need to
come
be
like-
overwhelmed. You need to
Yes.
get your brain overwhelmed with a language that you're trying to learn. Totally
Yes.
immersed, totally overwhelmed. That you need to get to the point that you feel that you're not gonna make it.
Yes, but also to have a lot of knowledge, like you already did, but not enough knowledge. So in other words, suddenly you are able to, say, oh my goodness, it's like I can do this. And, in English they say trial by fire.
Trial
right?
by fire.
Prueba a fuego, right? And that's what it is to work in a call center. I mean, it's
It
one
is.
thing to
It
be able
was.
to speak in person. It's most difficult to speak a foreign language on the phone because you don't have gestures to help you understand.
That's one of the things. The other thing is that I had to deal with a lot of accents, which I didn't before. I had to deal with
What do you
accent
mean?
with accents.
Accent. Yes,
Yeah,
of course.
that was tough for me because I was like, what is this guy saying? I can't really understand. And the other thing is that because of my accent too, I had this issue because people who called, they were basically worried about their stuff, and they wanted things done quickly. And because I was
Yes.
stumbling, trying to understand and everything, they were like, "Are you an American? Where are you from? I need to speak to a white guy." And I was like, "Oh man, that's so frustrating."
Wow.
It was so frustrating.
Sure.
But then,
No. Yes.
yeah, I think that was a very interesting process. And then now you mentioned something that I would like also to discuss, and I think it's very interesting for whomever is watching this video, and is the fact that you mentioned that we need somehow some background before, some educational background before getting to this point. And there is when I think most of the people who are trying to learn, they face this little problem where they think either I need, or do I really need grammar or educational foundations, or I just need to be immersed and exposition.
Yeah.
So
That's another.
what are your thoughts or from your
experience?
experience about this?
Well, like you, I think we also share opinions on this. I think you need to know a certain amount of grammar. I mean, it's inevitable to understand the way language works to a certain degree. I wouldn't make it the top priority, but maybe the second most important priority. I mean, you need to understand how language works. In fact, my sons are bilingual because they're raised here in Spain, and I always speak to them in English. I mean, they are truly bilingual. But that means that they don't
I'm
have
sorry, were
any
they born
idea-
in the United States?
No, they were born here.
Okay.
Okay, and they were raised here.
Okay.
So they're 13 and 12. I've spent 17 years in Spain. So, yes, and so they are truly bilingual. In other words, they don't think. They don't really have to shift something in their minds to go from one language to another. But that also means that they really don't understand what they're doing when they're speaking. So now they're learning French. And I say to them, good thing you're learning French now, because now you're learning, you have to make sense of what you're saying, because if you ever really do want to become truly fluent, I mean, because look, even in English, I have a lot to learn. In my own language, I have a lot to learn. I mean, I can always grow in my own language. So in other words, if they really want to become truly masters of English, I mean, I have a huge vocabulary in English. Why, Miguel? Because I'm a writer. I read all the time, okay? Now,
and you're a teacher.
And I'm a teacher. And also, I think I have probably a bigger vocabulary in Spanish than most people. That doesn't mean I can use it well, but I can recognize it better than most people. Like I've been exposed to so many words. If I read them, I know what they mean. I know words that my wife doesn't know in Spanish, but I can't use them. I can't pronounce them. I'm not comfortable using them. But so I have a tremendous knowledge of how languages work, and I think that every student has to have a certain knowledge of how language works. If you start to learn the language after, say, 12 years old, 13 years old, you have to start paying attention, because we are not children. That's another huge lie, Miguel, that we have to learn language like children do. We are not children.
That's funny, because how long do you take as a child to learn your language?
Yeah,
It's not a matter of 2 months.
No.
And even
No,
now,
no.
right as you said, you can be. I'm 51. I'm gonna be 52 now on. Well, anyways, it's gonna be pretty soon, March the 4th. So for you to know, and I still have a trouble with some things in Spanish, and it's funny because now that you mentioned that, that's another thing that people try always to find when they're looking for teachers. They always think that perhaps a native teacher is the better one. Not necessarily, because not necessarily for being a native speaker, you really are in position of teaching, and perhaps you're not really good at your own language,
or you're not good at teaching. You don't know
Sure.
the didactic methods. In other words, you don't know how to communicate things. I mean, to be a teacher, you have to be a really good communicator of knowledge. I mean, you can be a native speaker and be a terrible communicator of knowledge, and you really don't. In other words, that means the student has to do all the work.
Yeah, it won't make
right?
you a good teacher at all.
Yeah, I mean, one of the advantages that you have as an English teacher over me, as I have already said, is that you understand the challenges that it takes to learn a language as a Spanish speaker. In fact, one of the things that annoys me as a teacher, because I also consider myself a teacher of Spanish. Now, I could not teach Spanish to an advanced student. I couldn't. But I can teach Spanish to beginners. I can teach Spanish to intermediate students. And there is a kind of prejudice against me as a Spanish teacher. I get attacked by a lot of people like, who do you think you are to be able to teach Spanish? And I say to them, you know what? If you say that, then the majority of the English teachers in Spain would be out of work, because
Sure.
the majority of English teachers in Spain are not native speakers of English, and that does not mean they're bad teachers.
Sure.
Just like it doesn't mean I'm a good teacher because I'm a native speaker. I happen to be a good teacher, but that's not because I'm a native speaker. That's not.
Yeah.
The two things don't go together.
We totally agree on that.
It is another fascinating debate. Absolutely. Native teacher, non-native teacher. Do we learn like children? Do we not learn like children? Do we learn quickly or do we not learn quickly? Those are the three of the biggest sort of like lies, debates that go with language learning. You know, and I think they should be very, very clearly pointed out that you can't learn a language quickly. It doesn't really matter if the teacher's a native speaker. What matters is if they're a good speaker. And you can't learn languages like children if you're not a child. You need to know a little bit of grammar, although it can't be the most important thing. That has to be very, very, very clearly explained to students. So
There has to be a method. There has to be a method.
there has to be a
Yeah.
method.
Yeah,
Yes,
sure.
it has to be.
Sure. Now, having said that, do you think for people who don't have the chance to go and live in another country, is it possible to get fluent and get to master somehow second language?
I do think it's possible. It's more difficult, but they have to be sort of like you. They have to be obsessed with maybe American or British culture, either music or films. Nowadays, because of the social networks and of all the opportunities, I mean, forget it. I mean, you can hear...
There's a
any music,
lot of
any
resources
film.
and awesome resources over there. Free resources.
Yes. Free.
Yeah.
And for example, our channels are a perfect example
Sure,
of that. I
sure.
mean, both my stuff and your stuff
Sure.
is free.
Sure.
We do this por amor al arte, for the love of it. You
Totally,
know?
totally.
But I do think it's possible. I think the most difficult thing, perhaps, is being able to speak and to write correctly, because that's the one thing that the internet doesn't really allow you to do. I mean, you could have chats like this. I think video games are a great way for kids to play and speak foreign languages with each other. I see my kids do it.
And they have the motivation, which is something
Yes.
very important.
Absolutely. Like, they really want to learn to speak English so that they can play Fortnite with somebody in wherever. I see
Sure.
my kids do it. And so I think that with all the disparaging or pejorical comments about video games and social networks, without a doubt, one of the advantages of these platforms is that it accelerates sort of learning in English. In fact, I would say in the last 10 or 15 years, there's a new type of English student who enters. I no longer teach English in academies, but for the last 10 years, a new type of student who would enter into the academy who already had an intermediate level, not from what they learned in school, but only from what they had heard through English music, English series, and that sort of stuff, which you can relate to.
Yeah, and we have all the tools. Tools are pretty much available for everyone. John, I want to ask you a question from the perspective of a Spanish speaker who learned English and is talking to an American English speaker. How important do you think, from your perspective, communication-wise, is the fact of being accurate when talking as opposed as effective when communicating?
I think it's much more important to be effective. In fact, I think there is an obsession with students, especially in Spain, to speak like a native.
Yeah.
They want to,
Like,
It's
I
like-
want to sound perfect. I need to
Yeah.
sound with no accent. I want
Yes.
to be the master of speak better than the native themselves.
Exactly. I mean, I think that, in fact, I would say that there are a lot of students who, because they try so hard to speak in an American accent, I can't understand them. Like, if they just spoke with their normal accent, for example, I think it's beautiful. I think accents are beautiful. I love.
It's your culture.
I love that
It's your
have
cultural
it's
background,
culture.
basically. Yeah, it's who you are.
It's who you are, and I think you should not try to erase your accent. In fact, I would say try to keep it.
I think
You know,
you can try and not to lose your accent, but at least pronounce the best that you can.
Right. You
One
have to
thing doesn't
pronounce
have
correctly.
yeah.
Right. Right. You have to pronounce correctly. Like, you can't say. Let me think of an example here.
It's like the I,
Well,
the
for
sound of the I.
Yes,
When
for
you
example,
say
yes,
this
exactly.
and these, things
Right.
like that, or
That's
my
the
friend,
thing when you-
I've seen a movie of Brad Pitt, and it's like Pitt,
Right.
no, it's Brad Pitt, blah blah blah. Man, it's not something that it's gonna hurt your communication process at all. Sure, you could try and do that fine tuning when it comes to your pronunciation or whatever. But I don't think that's something that's gonna really affect you when it comes to
No.
the communication process.
No, it's not. But as you say, there are certain words that you have to pronounce correctly. But if you pronounce them correctly, that does not mean pronouncing them in the American accent. First of all, because as you know, as you just spoke about, you know there are so many different accents in English alone.
Sure.
One accent is not more correct than another accent.
Sure.
So in other words, if there
Same
are so
thing
many
in Spanish.
accents,
I think every language has the whole thing. I have a French friend, and he when we talk about languages, he says exactly the same.
Yes. We have to be proud of our accents. We have to be proud. I will never try to get rid of my accent. In fact, I think it makes my language, my speaking of Spanish, more colorful.
That's who you are.
Personally,
Sure.
it's who I am. Absolutely.
John, this has been a very interesting conversation. I think just to wrap up, if you may, why don't we switch to Spanish and give some pointers to whomever is on a beginner level, is watching this video, and maybe want to have some ideas from your experience on how to start from scratch learning a second language.
Desde la nada, ¿no?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes,
desde
vamos.
cero. Sí, desde
Cero.
Sí.
Desde cero. Sí, vamos a hablar en español un ratito para, pues, ya, vamos a hacerlo. Sí,
Sí.
por supuesto.
Sí. Las personas que están viendo este video, que tienen un nivel básico o que están empezando, yo creo que voy a tratar de poner subtítulos aquí para aquellas personas que pronto no tengan este nivel. Las otras pueden disfrutar de todo lo que hemos hablado. Pero estas personas que están empezando, desde tu perspectiva como profesor nativo, que me parece muy importante, el método que manejas que me encanta, cuando hablas en español, hablas en inglés, pone los subtítulos en temas muy cotidianos. ¿Cuáles crees que serían tres ideas básicas que deberían tener en cuenta para empezar el proceso de aprendizaje?
Pues yo siempre digo a mis alumnos que necesitamos tiempo, paciencia y práctica. Que ya hemos hablado en inglés que las mentiras que están por ahí diciendo que eso es la manera más rápida de aprender inglés. Eso es, como ha dicho tú, una bandera roja. ¿Funciona en español?
Ahora me pones a pensar. No, nosotros no decimos bandera roja, nosotros decimos más bien que es como una señal de advertencia.
Yeah.
A warning signal.
Red.
Sí, una señal de advertencia.
Quizás este método no es 100% honesto. Entonces tenemos que saber que vamos a tardar en poder hablar un idioma nuevo y hablarlo bien. Y también tenemos que tener en cuenta que antes de poder hacer algo bien, primero tenemos que hacerlo mal. Entonces ya hemos hablado que, mira, nadie va a empezar o va a romper a hablar inglés como un nativo. Entonces tenemos que saber que vamos a pasar vergüenza, vamos a tener que pensar, por Dios, soy un estúpido, no soy capaz de poder hablar este idioma. Mira, este tío, esta tía sí puede hablar, como es que yo no puedo. Entonces, paciencia, poco a poco. Siempre digo a mis alumnos que es muy importante ver el idioma y escuchar el idioma muchas veces en el mismo día, mejor que un rato de una hora, porque tenemos que, mira, para aprender una cosa muchas veces tenemos que entenderlo en muchos contextos distintos. Entonces, ¿cómo diría? Para crear una realidad más o menos como es cuando estás viviendo en el extranjero, ¿vale? Tienes que ponerte en una situación o crear una situación cuando tú estás con el idioma muchas veces en el mismo día.
Rodearte, ¿vale?,
¿vale?,
todo el tiempo.
Sí, 5 minutos aquí, 10 aquí, escribiendo cosas.
Que no se quede en la hora de estudio que se toma cada día. Tiene que ser todo el día. buscar la
Todo el
forma
día.
de rodearse del idioma.
Y no tiene que ser pesado. Como has dicho, tú puedes ver una
Pequeñas
película,
cosas, constantes.
una canción y escuchar una canción muchas veces. Eso es lo bonito de una canción. No te cansas de escucharlo. Pues tú escuchas una canción 4 o 5 veces, escuchando la canción, leyendo la letra. Siempre digo en mi canal que es muy importante entender tanto con los ojos como con el oído. Y tiene que mezclar esto. Los subtítulos, muy importante. No solo por ejemplo, si estás viendo una película en inglés, pues los subtítulos también en inglés. Muchas veces, ¿cómo se dice en español? A sitcom. Sitcom.
Sitcom, buena pregunta, porque esta palabra la aprendí yo en inglés y nunca le
Sí.
busqué una traducción. El sitcom sería como...
Pues es interesante la palabra porque sit means sentarse
sí,
y comes from comedy. So, te sientas y lo ves una comedia. Sitcom.
porque aquí nosotros vemos las series, las novelas, que serían de soap operas, y serían programas de televisión. No sé, la verdad.
Normalmente son de 30 minutos.
Sí,
de largo,
claro.
como
Friends, How I Met Your Mother.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I'm
Entonces,
watching right now. Me fui a inglés, discúlpame. Ahora a veces me pasa.
Normal.
Ahora estoy viendo una que se llama New Girl. Me ha parecido muy interesante por todo las expresiones y cosas que utilizan. Claro, esos son los sitcoms, pero no, mira, no sabría qué palabra específica ponerte para ello.
Creo que no hay. Pero lo que pasa, quiero decir, es que muchas veces estos programas como Friends, cuando tienen un capítulo de 25 minutos y no es un drama muy complicado.
Denso, sí, o sea, muy ligero.
Tú ves lo que está pasando, entonces tú puedes fijarte específicamente en el idioma. Y también, por ejemplo, en una serie como por ejemplo Friends, es tan bien hecho en el humor, son todos actores súper buenos, entonces tú puedes verlo más que una vez. Porque no importa qué va a pasar,
Claro.
Lo que es más o menos la forma de hacer la comedia. Entonces, también mejor que una película de drama, de acción, de suspense, una serie de comedia, cuando tú puedes para 25 minutos fijarte en la comedia. Muchas veces no nos damos cuenta lo que estamos aprendiendo subconscientemente. Entonces hay el aprendizaje consciente y hay el aprendizaje subconsciente. Cuando de repente sale de tu boca una palabra que no sabía que tú sabías. ¿Sabes? Y ¡pum! Ahí está. Y es como un milagro. Como no sabía que tenía esta palabra, como en mi
Una
mente.
expresión también.
También. Y eso es una de las alegrías de aprender otro idioma.
Claro.
Cuando de repente, quizás con un par de cervezas, suelta 1, 2 o 3 cosas que no sabía que realmente estaba en tu repertorio
Sí.
de inglés
Sí.
o de español.
Sí, del idioma
Eso
que
es
estás
muy
aprendiendo, claro.
Es muy gratificante, ¿no?
Joe, this has been amazing. I really admire you from your work ever since I got
Y yo a ti,
to find your channel. Whenever I have the chance.
Eso va a ser, Miguel, tú hablas en inglés y yo hablo en español para terminar.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So that's interesting. So I really appreciate you for being here with us, for sharing this with us. I hope this is not going to be the last time. It's the first one. Hopefully not the last one. And thanks for being here.
Somos un buen equipo.
Sure.
Somos un buen equipo.
Sure.
Y compartimos muchas cosas. Y yo creo que vamos a hacer otros vídeos así y seguramente van a ayudar y animar a los demás para que aprendan otros idiomas, que es más o menos el propósito de nuestros canales, de compartir nuestros conocimientos y que todo el mundo sea fluente.
Yeah,
que todo el mundo tenga fluidez en los dos idiomas.
Sure, and it's something interesting because free resources available for everyone, and from the perspective of the self-teaching learners.
Yes.
So-
¿Cómo se dice?
Autodidactas. Autodidactas.
Autodidactas.
Sure.
Yes.
John, I love you, man.
Un placer, Miguel.
I hope, I wish you the best always, and we'll meet again. Sure.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely, Miguel. Adios. my
Bye-bye.
friends.